a lot of mentors advised me, you can have someone else doing the numbers, but if you don't know the numbers, you're in a whole world of trouble. And so, like, okay, I don't want to, but I'm going to understand every number on my line item spreadsheet from all these professionals who understand how the numbers go together, but they can give me these reports that make it easier for me to understand how it's impacting my bottom line.
Well, very excited for the podcast today. We have Kylie Ponton with us. Welcome, Kylie.
Hi, thanks. I'm very excited too.
Yeah, and Kylie is the principal designer and CEO, and you have an incredible design firm, I know, down there in Florida. And at High Point this year, I was speaking with Luann Nigera, which tends to happen. She was actually just messaging me this morning about, getting together either this fall or spring again and do another panel. But I met some of your amazing team and, was able to, since that meeting, follow you and see some of the amazing things you're doing down in Tampa and all over for that matter.
Yeah, that's great. I've been following Luann since I think episode 2 of her podcast. So, of course, that's how I found out about your podcast was hearing you interviewed there. So I like the way that the design world kind of works in circles like that, and we get to hear about people that we might not have otherwise met.
Yeah, it's funny how it just connects you, right? Through the podcast or through Instagram. And yet here we are having hosting you on my show. And something that, as you know, I speak a lot about on the podcast is generosity precedes prosperity. And it's a lot of the guests I bring on do a lot as far as charity or nonprofit, and a lot of times based on the conversation, we don't even get to touch those, you know, information on what they're doing behind the scenes. And I know for you, Savvy Given by Design, Tampa, I just think that there's some amazing things as I was looking into that and on your website and just some unique stories. And so, you know, bring us an audience in about, why is that such a priority as far as giving back when we know the amount of effort and time it takes to be a very talented interior designer?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, just seeing opportunities where we could give back, they were always, prior to starting Savvy Giving by Design in the Tampa chapter, they were always a little bit limited or very specific or kind of, defined by a small period of time when you would sign up for something. And it would be great on the day, but it was harder to find something that was like really long term where we could feel like we personally were making a difference as a firm.
Hmm.
And so, speaking of Luann Nigara, I listened to a podcast that she was hosting with Susan Winterstein, who's out of California, super talented designer. And she had started Savvy Giving by Design. And I heard the podcast and I stopped the podcast at the end and I Googled Susan and I called her directly and I said, I have to bring this to Tampa because it really just it spoke to every single thing that I'd been looking to do as far as like being a designer and giving back and helping children, and it was all she was already doing it. So it was really exciting to see that there was this kind of not formula, but kind of, like there was a way that you could do it and repeat it successfully over and over again and really impact way more people than just maybe doing like a one-off room or partnering with someone locally to impact one family. So that's kind of what drove us to say like, let's get involved. And we did.
So what does that mean when you speak to like the formula and it's more than doing one room? Like you mentioned, I know when we were connecting offline about Tony, maybe that story, but what does
Yeah.
it entail when you're coming in to do this? What is that formula? What is that recipe like? What is the full scope of work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a really great fit for designers that have been working in the industry for a while and doing either like new construction or large scale remodels and furnishings because it's basically like taking what we do every day for our really high end clients and just boiling it down to like the tiniest components and redoing that for just one room. And so, we hear of a child or a child is referred to us by another organization, and then we go in and we meet with them, we meet with the family, but we really talk to the child who's going through some kind of medical crisis. And they're usually in the midst of, a pretty horrendous treatment that's really
Hmm.
challenging their bodies, like chemo or radiation or, transfusions, those kinds of things. But every single time I meet these kids, they have like these pockets of joyfulness when they hear you're coming and when they meet you, they're so excited and they tell you what their dreams are for their room. And they'll tell you my favorite color, or I want, a green room, or I want an ocean room, or a mermaid room. And, it's just like everything you ever maybe wanted as a kid. Um, they have those dreams. And so we get to hear them. We get to know what their needs are physically as well. And then we look at the room from like a really holistic point too. So there's all these layers, right, of taking out maybe allergens and things that can maybe be impeding their ability to heal. But then adding in all of those magical things that they've asked about, that's where the joy comes in.
What's your favorite one you've done?
Oh, I don't think I could ever pick one. I mean, I think every one that we do is my favorite one until the next one. But the one that we just did for Tony, I would say was one of my favorite experiences. So I can talk a little bit about that.
Please.
So we met Tony. He was diagnosed when he was 6 years old last November, and we met him this year. And he was just a really active, sporty kid, really just joyful and exciting, and loved playing sports and loved being with his five siblings, and just this really happy, joyful family. And he really wanted to be a TikTok star. So he had this really sweet kind of TikTok channel that showed like, his dances and him at football and just really
Mhm.
cool stuff. And so when we met him, he's in the midst of treatment. And so, he's pretty ill. But he just has this bright and joyous smile. And so when we designed his room, he was kind of like, I don't really know what I want. I like blue, I like green, I like space, I like football, I like every sport. So, and sometimes the kids, especially when they're little, they don't 100% know how to articulate. They're just excited. But when we revealed his room, all five of his siblings were there. And
Wow.
his big brother, who was going into ninth grade, just kept running around the room like with the most joyful look on his face. And he just kept saying, Tone, Tone, oh my gosh, Tone, look at this. And they just had this interaction that was elevated even than any other reveal I think I've ever done.
I love that. I mean, anyone that's been like, as you're sharing that, we've been fortunate to do a lot of service with Phoenix Children's Hospital, and um, there's just something about, and I have kids, so maybe it's just something that's really sensitive to me. Having kids and nieces and nephews, and when you see someone young, like the resilience of like so many times that they're dealing with something that is very tragic and very difficult, and yet they find those simple things to find joy. And then I'm sure for you, like the uplifting side, to be able to go in and all of us that were kids that probably wanted like this amazing room, and yet you get to do that, Kylie, and try to give them something to focus on outside of maybe the treatment that can take its toll on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it is that they're going through a week at a time in hospital for these treatments. And then when they come out of treatment, they come home and they're in their room for a lot more time than they're actually in the hospital.
Mhm.
And so that was something that the founder of Savvy was really passionate about, conveying to people that wanted to be a part of this organization is like these rooms are a place for them to go and rest and heal and make memories with their family. And sometimes, they go from the hospital to their room and there's not very much interaction outside of those two places for a really long time. And so when you really think about that and what that means, like one of Tony's wishes for our most recent room was to have a bunk bed so that some of his siblings could have sleepovers in there, and
That's cute.
just knowing like that's how they're going to hang out and spend time together as a family was pretty cool.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, it's just neat hearing that, that sibling side of it. And, when you're going through this process, are you working with your vendors? Are they participating? Some of your suppliers? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the involvement outside of like just your firm?
Yeah, it's what we found is that I mean, we started doing rooms in 2019, right when I started Ponton, a little after I started Ponton Interiors. And the very first room, we reached out to all of my favorite vendors that I was using for our design. So our window treatment people, our wallpaper installers, our painters, like our warehouse and delivery people, and our closet people. Like they all just said yes, like right away. I kind of started explaining and really going into my pitch, and they're like yes. And so, for example, like our closet company, we've done 25 rooms now. And our closet company
Wow. Wow,
has done a custom closet in every single room.
it's
I mean,
incredible.
it's just unbelievable. And every time I start the email the same way, like, hey guys, we have a new room. I know you're really busy. What do you think? And I just, it just brings me so much joy when they say yes. Like, and they do, you know, our electrician has put in new lighting for every single room. Our window treatment company has done like a lot of rooms for us. They'll bring in shades, which is really important because sometimes we'll go into these kids' houses and they don't have like good shading systems or window treatments on their windows. And so bringing in like a blackout shade and really pretty drapes is not just aesthetic, it's helping them sleep and get rest, you know?
It's amazing. As you've seen, maybe that collaboration as you've worked with your vendors and suppliers, how has that relationship maybe become stronger? The camaraderie, the friendship, just in working together, in this joint venture of giving back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that defines us like as an organization and then between these other groups, you know, it makes us feel like we can take a small thing that we are really good at and make a big difference. And it definitely forms this bond with the other people in our organization. And then they'll tell people that they know that might be able to help and join in as well. It's a cool kind of ripple effect.
It's funny because, over the years, as I've seen, maybe it's just the human interaction of things, right, Kylie? I mean, this is my personal opinion, and maybe it's from my personal experience, but, I've seen where, a lot of us go through the day to day, whether you're thinking about how can we change the company culture of our firm? How could we change the culture of how we interact with, our vendors and trade partners and our clients? And that day to day, it's kind of tough to break through that surface level. Just maybe call it the transaction of like, information in, information out, trying to get the project completed. Whereas when you see anyone that's taken a trip, like, to High Point, I'm sure when you've gone to High Point with your team, that bonding you have with your team
Mhm.
when, we just went to Marvin Windows with the team and the bonding of us, being together at dinner, at breakfast, like all day, like you just have these unique bonds. I've seen, I'm a big fan of golf and I've seen when you go golfing, like there's just like bond, you're with someone for 4 or 5 hours. My clients play, my trade partners play. And so you build this friendship, but it's like there's levels, and what I mean by levels is when you get to the point like you are, Kylie, as you're giving back, I've seen where as you've served together in different capacities, and especially in giving back, you mentioned your painter who's coming in, the cabinet company electrician, when they're doing something just kind of, pro bono, they're coming and doing this on the side and they're putting in something out of their own time, own hours when they're doing this day to day. Um, I've always had an experience where just that friendship, that bond, that connection so much greater. And, Spencer, with my team ended up planning this. They have an organization that's Feed My Starving Children, and our team went to do that. And when you're side by side doing a service activity like that, it's just, after hours, everyone's going at 6 o'clock at night, you know,
Mhm.
it's just, there's just a bond that's a lot different when you're serving side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that really bonds our team together as well. So, you know, when I started the organization, I called my friends and my family and my team members together for this meeting to pitch it to them. And, you know, I was kind of like, I don't know if they're going to think it's a good idea, or, you know, maybe they're too busy and so we went to this coffee shop and we had this big pitch meeting and I had a little presentation. And by the time I had left the coffee shop and got back to my office, I had like 4 emails saying, we want to do this. And it was just like instant excitement about like the idea of giving back together because I think people recognize that, you know, when you're together and you're doing something that's meaningful, you walk away feeling a lot better.
What I find most fascinating about this, Kylie, is, um, throughout my career, like I've had some great mentors, right? That whether they've said the exact term, generosity precedes prosperity. I mean, one specifically told me that, but all of them kind of had that same mantra, right? An
Hmm.
ethos. And I had a professor in college and he made a comment. And I still remember to this day this comment. And this was, I'm dating myself. This is like 23 years ago, but I'm in college. And, he said, if you're not giving back now in college, and right, you think in college, like for me, I was working, I was married, I had my daughter kind of young. And so I'm kind of balancing these things. And he said, if you're not going to give back now, whether it's time or donation or money, like you never will. Like there's no better place to start now. And here you are. Where a lot of people may say, well, when I'm 5 years in business or 10 years in business, are they, not that they're creating some artificial or superficial like timeline, but like you started your company and yet you're giving back at the same time. And anyone knows that started a company, it's hard enough to start your firm and build clientele and build operations and organization and systems and hiring. And yet you're finding time to give back. I mean, I think it says a lot about who you are as a person. And in my opinion, probably would speak to maybe why you've excelled, in such a fast rate in your career.
I love that. Thank you. I mean, I think I was definitely feeling driven to do something. And so I remember like maybe having a call with Luann a week after I heard Susan's podcast and talking to Luann about the fact that I was getting ready to start my own firm. And she kind of walked through like, okay, why is now the right time? And one of my reasons was like, well, I want to start this other thing, like savvy giving. Like I can't do it if I'm working for someone else. It has to, you know. And
Mhm.
so I think like there's so many ways when you start to look back that you see how giving back has driven you to different places that you might not have gone. And I think
Mhm.
that's another really cool thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, it challenges you, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
anything else,
for
Kylie,
sure.
yeah, you're challenged in creativity, you're challenged in time, you're challenged in
Mhm.
efficiency.
Yeah.
Um, how has that played a role? And maybe you speak to this. I mean, you're at a point now where you've been in business 6 years. You're doing projects that are 5 to 15 million. I think
Hmm.
most people aspire to get to that point 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. What do you attribute to, a success to building your firm so quickly, both locally and nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that because it makes me sound young, but I did work for another large firm before I started my own. So, I mean, I think there's, a lot of learning that goes into being like a senior designer for someone else. And, having that experience really showed me where I wanted to go with my business. And so it definitely helped kind of catapult me. And then seeking out mentors and different groups that could help me kind of catapult more quickly perhaps than if I'd started this 20 years ago because I had, already had my kids and, gone to university twice and gotten degrees and worked for someone else. And so to me, when I was starting the firm, I was like, I'm too old. It's too late. I got to do this like now. I got to get through all of these stumbling blocks quickly and move on. And so to me, that was just about hiring business coaches that could, help you learn. And then leaning on the other people that I met that were in that same phase as I was, or who were at a stage where I was aspiring to go, and just leaning on them for advice.
It's interesting because even though you had experience, so yes, design practically in by itself, right? You're a senior designer, you
Mhm.
understand how to design. I mean, there's so many elements to it. It's much more complicated than anyone realizes. I mean, I understand that having worked on these complex projects, but running a business is different. So like you go off on your own and you may have experience, in the field, no
Yes.
different than an electrician or a carpenter or framer or plumber, but running the business is totally different. How did you mentioned you sought mentors? Where did you find them? How did you connect with them? How did that, help you to kind of build the enterprise itself outside of just the design?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, mostly through podcasts. I think podcasts have taught me so much more than, my formal education did in the sense of running a business. So I listened to Luann from like, like I mentioned, I think episode 2, and I feel like, she's just given me so much through my life just through her podcast, let alone like her friendship and mentorship. And then I also hired Gail Doby, who's a business coach for luxury interior designers. And that experience was phenomenal as well because being a part of her group and program put me into a group with, you know, 5 designers who I am still very, very close to. We talk like multiple times a week about the challenges and the wins and what we're doing differently and if we're hiring. And, when you start a business, I found for me, because I'm also kind of an introvert, like I didn't want to go to networking events and try and figure out how to run a business by meeting other business owners. Like I wanted a
Mhm.
little bit of a safety cocoon. And so to me, like finding other designers who were, at that level and looking to grow their business just like I was, really put me in a safe place where I could learn from them and they could learn from me and we could grow together. And interior design and building, and like our industry is so specific. We have so many problems that you might not have if you're a realtor or someone who's working in a completely different industry at like the Tampa Bay business networking events. Like those are great for maybe meeting people and getting to know your community, but learning about running an interior design business, that didn't seem like the way to do it. So
Do you
I'm
remember
all
as you?
about
Oh,
finding
go
the
ahead.
right people and paying the right people to help teach you the things that you might not know yet, instead of trying to learn it the hard way. I've learned enough things the hard way.
Yeah, it's much more valuable if someone else can give you the advice as opposed to learning yourself.
Mhm.
I use the tagline, I think I paid too many people to build their houses. So it's probably better to,
Yeah.
to have some mentorship there to kind of save you that the headache, if anything. As you
Mhm.
look back to those early conversations and mentorship and networking with other design firms, are there, certain pieces of advice or, um, metrics that they had spoke to, KPIs? What are something that stuck out that you feel really helped you early on to just get a grasp on, your business?
Um, that's a great question. I would say, I mean, probably just pushing you to do the work more so than the advice necessarily specifically that they give. Like, I think when I think of people like Susan Winterstein, who started Savvy, who I consider another of my great mentors, like leading by example. So seeing someone who's doing what you want to do, to me, that was like really empowering. And then figuring out like, okay, this is who I want to be. I want to be a designer who does incredible projects, who has a great team, who has a team that's really excited about the work that we do. But I really want to give back. And so you decide that and then you do the work to make it happen. And so, if your mentor is telling you like, you know, reach out to 10 people a week for marketing and follow up with them, and like that's all great. But if you don't do that, then, a year later you're still going to be sitting there kind of waiting for people to call, And that's hard for me, like as an introvert. I'm like, I don't want to do it. But I think, that and then knowing when to hire someone that's outside of your skill set has been
Hmm.
really a key factor that I would say helped us grow more steadily and quickly than probably we would have otherwise. Because the very first person I hired was my bookkeeper. Because I
Right.
know, like, sure, I can run QuickBooks or whatever we were running back in the day all day long, but I don't want to, and it's not my joyful place. So hiring that person who could take the numbers and then report them back to me was great. But then, a lot of mentors advised me, you can have someone else doing the numbers, but if you don't know the numbers,
Mhm.
you're in a whole world of trouble. And so, like, okay, I don't want to, but I'm going to understand every number on my line item spreadsheet from my accountant and, my bookkeepers and my CPA and all these professionals who understand how the numbers go together, but they can give me these reports that make it easier for me to understand how it's impacting my bottom line.
It's funny you say that because I look back at kind of those early points, and I think knowing the numbers was something I didn't know early enough or understand. Just being
Mhm.
open, and it's interesting when you do understand that and you know the numbers, how that makes a difference. Not only how you run your business, but how you communicate your value to clients and how you communicate your pricing and how you set
Mhm.
yourself up for success, or to your point, to know when to hire and can you afford it and can you bring them on because you understand what that means just from a business development arm and operations side.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that I really relied on was, just kind of that instinct as well. And so I think for me, one of my biggest challenges is knowing like when to trust myself and the inner voice and, when it's leading me in the right direction. And, sometimes that's what I think is so interesting about interior design and just podcast in general that I listen to. A lot of times they'll talk to or these Facebook groups, they'll talk to like, oh, this client's sending up all kinds of red flags, or this client's not a good fit because A, B, and C. And I had a client that called me literally the week after I opened my business, and she was a referral from an architect, and she was from out of town, and she was building here locally, and she said, well, I don't really like working with designers. I don't really need one, but I just need someone to kind of come hold my hand while I go shopping there locally. And my red flags or my
Yeah.
my designer inside voice from all these podcasts is saying, "That's no, you don't do that. You're a professional. You're a licensed designer." But I'm a week in, and I'm like, well,
I need the
someone's got to
work.
pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I'm on my fourth project with that particular client. We're building her fourth home together, and so I always look back and I'm like, man, imagine if I had said no. Imagine if I'd said to the Facebook groups, should I take this client? She just wants me to hold her hand while we go shopping. They'd be like, no, run for the hills. But my instinct led me in the right direction that day. So,
Well, there is something to be said about instinct. Do you feel though that client specifically was, as you were able to communicate maybe your value, maybe the process, like what changed for the client to maybe entrust you and realize that there's much more of a relationship here than maybe they probably, you know, would even consider before hiring you?
oh, I love that question because that's exactly articulates the journey that we've been through. So, the first time she came to meet with me, she flew in and, we met to go to the tile company to pick the tile that her builder needed. Um, and she was like, oh, wow, you're way too dressed up to but I was like, I'm a professional. Here I come.
Yeah.
Um, and so, it was just those first steps of me really articulating, like, here are the reasons you should use this tile. And I feel like, you just build trust day one from when you're really showing that you know what you're talking about, to the point where, most designers end up with clients that are like, I can't make any decisions without you now. But yeah, we built up trust based on like repeat interactions together. I think, something that you speak of all the time and that's highly important to me is the quality of drawings and
Mhm.
schedules and
Right.
communication. And so, that was one of the benefits of having worked for a firm before my firm is that I understood the benefits of that. And so when she came into town and we just looked at things, and then I turned around and produced this really complicated and detailed schedule, and her
Right.
builder was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've never seen something like this. She was like, oh, okay, now I get it. So
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. Like it's instinct, but it's about showing up, in the way that you want to be perceived as well.
It's funny you speak about that because it's easy to sit here in a way and say like I'm an expert in vetting clients now. Like I think both of us may think that, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not at all. And the reason I say that is because I've had two experiences recently where one of the clients at Precon, I'm just like every red flag was like just chirping, right? It's just like this is, you know, th- little things happening, and I won't get into any specifics, but really just a dialogue between the client together, the client with the design team, the client with the architect, and us. I'm like, this is like a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
And over the progress of the build, this ended up becoming one of our best clients we've ever had, right? And who's like a true like proponent and like huge endorser of AFT. In fact, what's really awesome is they sent my team who worked on their home, on this big vacation with their family afterwards, which is really cool. I mean, that's pretty rare for
Wow.
that to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
yeah, and then you have the client, you're like, "Oh, this is a slam dunk." Like, they check all the boxes and 2 months in, you're like, "What?
What
What
have
are
I
we doing?"
done?
Yeah, what have I done? And so,
Yeah.
but to your point, I mean, and again, this doesn't, work for every client, but I think in general, you started building trust with the client. You started showing, the way you dressed, right? The professionalism and how you conducted yourself, the professionalism in the presentation and the documentation that you're giving to the builder, right? It's these little check marks that are hitting, and then the client's like, okay, they start to see the value. And I think that's the hardest thing is that when clients do appreciate the value that we bring, whether me as the builder or you as a designer, Kylie, um, you start to earn the trust of the client. And once you have that trust, and it is typically, a very healthy relationship. I found that where these relationships go south with our clients is there's a breakdown in trust, whatever that means. And it could happen in so many different ways. And that's why it's a tough business that we deal with.
Yeah, it definitely is because, what one person's level of trust is going to be very different from your
Right.
next client's.
Right.
So, I mean, there's always that interpretation in between, which is, why I think it's super interesting that all of the advancements in AI and the, the kind of concepts that are coming down the pipeline and all the question about how that will impact the design world, there's just still this human factor that, especially at least right now, is just so important to really, I guess, even just capitalize on from our standpoint of like, we're human beings. And so, yes, there'll be mistakes because we're human beings, but we're going to have empathy for the situation you're going through. We're going to understand like how to make it right. And we're going to work with a team of human beings to fix, things as well. So,
Where have you found opportunities in business development? As you're looking for sales and selling the brand, and where have you found your clients?
gosh, I would say, you know, 90% of our business is word of mouth. And so some of it is from previous clients. Some of our business is repeat clients. We
Hmm.
have many projects that we've, done 4 or 5 houses with the same client, which is always exciting. And then I would say architects and builders, owners reps, just kind of
Hmm.
getting to know those people. And again, like maybe you get to know them on one project and then, you don't cross paths for a couple years even, but when a name comes up being needed for interior design down the road, they're going to remember that they had a great experience with our firm. And so usually that's when we'll see referrals from builders or owners reps. And then, the realtors that we come across, it's been interesting because I don't see like a lot of realtors referring us projects that we end up signing. So it's kind of interesting, but it's almost like just that kind of name recognition of people hearing you from multiple sources is also super helpful.
Hmm. It's
So
funny.
I mean, that's where most of our business comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from so many different angles. I mean, you have to almost hit on all these different, areas to like find these clients, especially for the specific projects we're working on. What do you feel has been a project that's really challenged maybe your creativity?
Hmm. Gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that most of our projects, we at the like in the past couple years, we've gotten to be pretty creative on. I'd say our project in Cabo was challenging because it was almost like with a spec builder in that, they were building a lot of houses in the same development. So they had like a very set exterior,
Hmm.
look to the style of the homes. So that's probably an example where, for the exterior of the homes, we get involved a lot in that. And we had, limitations on what we could select from. But I guess like on a project like that, that's like, over $10 million, like even the worst selections are still stunning, beautiful materials. So you can work with almost anything, when you're using like really beautiful stones and marbles and natural materials. But yeah, I would say that one was challenging, maybe more logistically than creatively, because it was in not just in another state, which we also do off and on, but in another country.
It's tough. I mean, from a design perspective, a lot of people say, well, Brad, as a builder, like, do you go build all over the country? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of layers to that because you at the core, you have to have a superintendent willing to travel. You have to have boots on the ground, right? Of someone that's going to be there. For
Yes.
design, you may have the flexibility to do that. However, there's still a lot of challenges for you to
Yeah.
understand, market conditions and suppliers and cost and logistics. And, you may have back home these relationships, as you mentioned, that you've built over time from being working from someone else, from having your company, from, giving back and doing the charity things. But now you're in these new territories like Cabo and other parts of the country. How, what walk us through the time commitment, what that operation looks like for you to do the R&D and research to to make sure that depending on the climate and the construction type and the builder you're working with, there's so
Mhm.
many elements that can make it very challenging for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the project that we did in Cabo was amazing because it was with a client we'd worked with multiple times. So we already had an amazing rapport with them. And then when they were considering even purchasing there, they flew us down with their owner's rep to kind of walk through what that would look like. So I'd say like research boots on the ground is amazing because you get to meet who some of the team players will be and kind of get a feel for whether it's going to be a good fit.
Mhm.
And then I would say, you know, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't have said like, oh, we would never work in a project where they're not using professional software to track the build, right?
Yeah.
But now I think I would say if we're doing an out of state project and they're not in Procore or Build a Trend or co-construct, like no, it's that would definitely be a severe limitation on a project like that, I think.
That's an interesting perspective. So early in your career, you mentioned that if they didn't have software, depending on the organization, the builder, again, this maybe goes back to that first example you give of this first client that you may take a chance. You're like, I can do this, we can figure it out. But, now with the opportunity to be a little bit more selective, a little bit more seasoned, why is that such a big deal that the contractor has that organization? Like, how does that impact you, in your team?
Well, I think ultimately you just want the client to be happy at the end of the day. And so, I've been on multiple projects where the client's happy at the end of the day with us, but maybe not so happy with another part of the team, like the builder or the owner's rep. And so, just in terms of like the ease and the joy that coming to work every day brings, if you've got a team that's all working really smoothly together, it makes life a lot happier. And I would say, where I do pride ourselves on the fact that we are super organized. So on the projects, we'll still have projects come up that are large scale projects and they're not running it through a software program. And it's, again, like to your point, like, do I look at that and say, I'm not going to take it? Like, if everything
Right.
else is a good fit, I have a lot of faith in our like old school Google sheet that, has 75 tabs that we can share with the client so they know everything that's been approved. And like, we kind of created our own baby, Procore co-construct for in the background because every now and then we'll run across a builder that's like, yeah, I'm more of a yellow legal pad kind of guy. And we're like, holy cow, that's terrifying. But we can still have a good project with, people that are using, older technology or not very much because we're super organized.
Hmm.
But I would say that, when we come up on builds where they're using these professional programs, everything's there. So, if we miss a deadline, like it's out in the open for everyone to see. If, so there's this motivation for every single team member to bring their A game, you know,
Yeah, I
because
love
you don't
that.
want to be the one on the chain where it's like, hello, do you have an answer for this? Like, you better have it sorted out.
What do you require? I mean, for the builders that do have software that maybe runs, again, it's never gonna be seamlessly because it's construction, but maybe runs a
Yeah.
little bit more efficiently. What do you typically gauge your involvement during the build? Like, is there a certain amount of visits that you are putting in your contract with the clients? I mean, based on your experience, that project in Cabo, like how often would you have to visit that in person?
Yeah. I mean, that one, they run Percol, which, and it was incredibly seamless. I mean, I've never been on a cleaner job site. I've never been on one of yours, but it was immaculate. They had people there, super organized every day. There were photos uploaded every single day. The superintendent would do FaceTime walkthroughs with me every single week.
Wow.
And so it was very unusual. I'd not been on a project that was that well organized on the builder side before. And so we only made 4 site visits over the course of building for a year and a half, which
It's
is
amazing.
very atypical. And we really did not have any major issues. Like nothing that we got there and we're like, oh, I can't believe they put that there. It was very, very organized. But I'd say typically we have at least 12 site visits in our contract, and they're kind of broken down by phases, like framing walkthrough, plumbing rough in, the different kind of key components that we're usually very involved in. We want to be there with the superintendent and or the client and making sure that the design intent is being executed the way that we think it should be.
It's interesting because when you mentioned how organized and clean the site was, they would do FaceTime videos. So, in a way, it limited you to only have to go out 4 times.
Mhm.
Are there other processes or systems that that builder did that made your life easy? Their communication with you, their relationship, maybe their respect for you as a designer.
Mhm.
What are maybe some of those examples that made that relationship so positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to communication, really. The communication from the builder was, updated daily on site photos, and there was usually like some kind of activity in the software at least every week. They would send out a weekly report that was either like, hey, here's what we did this week, or we had a big storm this week, nothing got done, but you knew every step of the way. So, I mean, I really credit them with their communication and their ability to put the information in a place where everyone can access it. We use Basecamp as our back office
Yeah,
integration
Basecamp.
with our whole team. Yeah. And we love it because, I mean, once you're if you're working with a contractor where they're just emailing you every single thing that pops in their head, it bogs you down and it's hard to recall that information or find it later when you need it. So yeah, I think a program that can keep everyone organized, whichever one it is amazing.
From a builder perspective, what's interesting about that example, I mean, you mentioned, the daily logs that they had, weekly updates and look aheads, and they're doing photos daily. Commercial is it's run completely different than residential. And
Hmm.
so, I grew up in the commercial industry and in the trade specifically. And again, 25 years ago, as I'm in college and I'm, over the summer going back and working in San Diego, the company I worked for, it was very custom. We'd show up to the job site trailer every morning. We would check in. We would let them know the manpower, how many people are on site,
Hmm.
what we're going to do that day. The superintendent would go around and take photos of us working all day. I didn't
Hmm.
think much of it at the time. It's just it's just what you're trained to do. And then at the end of the day, we had to check out. We'd go back to the trailer. We'd kind of create a write up of everything we accomplished and what buildings we worked in. And, a lot of times we're working on the Navy base. There in San Diego, or maybe in the school. And so they had a very documented, day by day of what we accomplished. And now I own my business, a lot of things have transpired from good daily logs. One, to your point, it creates good communication with the client and with the design team, our designer and architect. Those weekly videos or FaceTime have been very valuable because as my team has done that, the designer who maybe not will not be on site every day or maybe once a month or once a quarter, whatever that is, they will see things and be like, hey, you need to pay attention to that, or this
Hmm.
maybe is getting installed incorrectly or whatever. And so you can catch things before they're too far. But on the flip side, I found the value, and this is probably more advice for the builder side, is that I've been in situations where I've had trade partners not perform. And, one of these trades wasn't performing, and we had to have, a big meeting as far as, their lack of production. And of course, in that meeting, hey, we've had people there every day. We're there all day. They're kind of going through the same song and dance we've all heard, and that we're their
Hmm.
number one priority. And we pulled it up. We pulled up the daily log, and over the 6 months, they were only on site 30% of the time. We had it all logged, and so just from a legal lawsuit, litigation side, there's a lot of value from us as the builder document, including to your point, making the transition easy for a designer that's in Florida as opposed to Cabo.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also the information's only as good as the people using it, right? So if you're not uploading the photos or uploading the documents or the change orders or the information, then you know we can only respond to it when it's actually being uploaded. So I've definitely seen the other end of it where someone's maybe using the software, maybe they're just getting into using it and it's not being fully integrated yet. But where we go through those same phases of growing pains. We have an employee coming back from maternity leave at the end of August. Um, and we're really excited. And she was in a role as an interior designer before she left on maternity leave. And right this second, we don't really have a need for another designer, but we have a need for a project manager. And,
Mhm.
we do a personality testing and those kinds of things where we use another coach to help us find our strengths and weaknesses. And she is so strong in the project management side of things. And so, that's where she's going to be really highlighted for the rest of this year is helping us make our processes that, we're excited about. We think they're pretty great, but we know they can be better. And so having her just really focus on like this overall, like looking at every single project we're doing what Luann calls the autopsy of the project, where
Right,
it's done
right.
and you rewind and you say, okay, where could we have done better? I'm excited to bring a whole nother level so that, we can just keep leveling up.
What is how does she feel about it?
That's funny that you asked that because my business operations manager asked me the same question, and I think the good thing about it is that it's still going to be in a really strong design role. So the projects where we're finding like we have a little bit of overwhelm or we have like a need for extra drawings or extra sourcing, or she's so well suited to integrate into a project where we need some extra design help that she'll still get to do quite a lot of design.
Mhm.
And so I mean, she tells me she's excited about it. We'll see. We'll talk back in like end of October, and I'll let you know. But I mean, I think it's a good opportunity to see how people can flex,
Mhm.
because we have a lot of different people in different stages of their life or career, and for her, she's coming back in person into the office 3 days, and for us and for my firm, if you're an interior designer, I need you here 5 days right now. Like that's
Mhm.
just we're very collaborative in our studio, and so um, maybe that makes me sound like a dinosaur, but I like people. I like people here working on the stuff.
Well, it's different. I mean, in fairness to you, I found that most designers that run their design firm are the same. I mean, there's something be that creative side and that group think and being together and bouncing ideas and inspiration and seeing those minds create. It's kind of hard to do that over Zoom. It's hard to
Hmm.
do that over a phone call. In person, the synergy is a lot different.
Hmm. Yeah, and we have weekly design kind of charrettes on every project where we'll get together as a team, or I'm together with the lead designer on a project, and we're really just digging into the nitty gritty, and we're pulling samples, and we're just getting inspired and creative, and so I think it's an interesting solution for right now. I think that it also offers different career tracks, right? So if you're a firm of our size and you're starting to think about like where do people want to go and where do they want to grow, there's an opportunity down the road for her to keep progressing more on the design side and become a senior designer or a lead designer. There's also an opportunity for her to progress more on like the development side and become like a design director where she's, there's just different ways to look at how you could take that opportunity and grow with it. So I like to keep things relatively open ended to see where people's strengths lead them to, but you know, that's our need
It's
right now. So
Well, I feel for you, Kylie, because I mean, you think about running a design business or a construction business. I mean, that's one of the most difficult things is getting the right people on the bus, get them in the right seat. And the
Mhm,
company evolves. Like you go through super busy times, you go through slower times, and you're trying to balance, right? These projects that could be delayed or they could move quicker than you thought. And you have the personnel and challenging them to move to something outside their scope from the creativity side of design to now the operation side. There is logistics there that can be challenging. And sometimes, as you know, it goes great. And sometimes you're like, okay, maybe we need to reevaluate this.
reevaluate. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we pivot a heck of a lot, but and we're in this really crazy time right now because we had Hurricane Helene and Milton here locally
Mhm.
that was
Right.
very devastating, and that was really concerning for our business because we had multiple people building on Davis Island, which was severely impacted by the storms, and many people lost their homes, and so we had to kind of look at that and say like, where will we go now? We just lost like two big, beautiful construction
Projects.
projects.
Hmm.
Yeah. And thankfully, like those clients pivoted into different things. And, we're just seeing it start to really impact now the people who've had a chance to go through the process, decide what they want to do, deal with insurance. And now we've got, a lot of new inquiries coming in for new builds as a result of people making that decision to move on. But yeah, it was a scary time for a while.
It is scary. I think any of us can relate. And maybe this turns into not just the scary side, but as you run your business and we're speaking about the logistics and organization and what do you find most rewarding about, starting Ponton Interiors?
Um, I mean, to be honest, you probably most of it is just building a team and having people be excited about the opportunities they have in their career, whether it's with me or just being super excited and involved in design and new construction, and seeing people go through that process that I went through back when I first started and didn't know anything about construction, and getting to learn all those things. Like, it's exciting for me to kind of mentor the people that are coming up as the next, talented team of designers. But some days I would say, it's really savvy giving by design. And if I could quit my job and just do that full time, then that's what I would do. But I try not to say that in front of my employees because I don't want them to get scared.
No, for sure. But I mean, savvy by design. I know we touched on this for like a majority of the beginning of the episode, but um, it's and again, this is not to say lightly like that your day to day isn't impactful or meaningful or what you're doing for clients. But I would imagine there's definitely a personal side of working with these children that just it's just different. It just is different, and that's really what it comes down to. And if that's something you could do all the time, I'm sure it'd be you would have a lot of very rewarding days because in fairness to our clients, like it's a very emotional process. It's a long process. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of dollars involved, and it can be high tense. Anyone like you and I that have worked on these long duration, complicated builds, it's a they're very sensitive times to the build. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, they are. And I think that, part of it maybe is just like human nature of that instant gratification. I mean, there's been savvy giving rooms where I've been sitting outside the house in the curb crying because the Pottery Barn bed got, delivered to the wrong address, and I don't know if it's going to make it for the reveal. And like, to me, like everything is riding on like this kid getting to come home and see this room. But it's not dissimilar to any time you've had that experience on a build where something goes wrong and the client's insanely upset. The big
I know.
difference is, like, the kid and their family are not going to yell at you. They're just going to say, make it happen when it happens. And I'm going to find some random, volunteer to go find that bed and pick it up and get it there. But, on a job site, when things go wrong and it's so much money at stake and so much time, and, you know, people are so passionate about it, it can be super stressful. So this is like my little side stress relief of joyfulness that just, comes into play every couple months.
And it may take some time, but I'm sure the joy is a win every time.
Yeah.
What advice have you given clients, as they're engaging you, through the build and to tee that off? I had a client, I was kind of giving the sales process and they're like, we want to move forward. And they're all, Brad, everything sounds great, but when are we going to hate you throughout the build? Like that was her question. And it kind
That's
of
a good
caught me off guard.
question.
Right? Yeah. I'm like, they kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, and cause I could identify pain points that a lot of customers have had at different phases.
Mhm.
And through that with another builder, mine had this like emotional roller coaster that we adapted for us, and I use that now. But what advice do you give your clients as they're working through with a designer? Because some of them, I would imagine, it's probably their first time. I mean, some have done it before, but best
Yeah.
advice you give a client.
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot of people, it's the first time building a home. And so they definitely come with a lot of questions. And I would say on the design time, we try and, repeatedly remind them that, on our side, we're human beings. And if we make a mistake, we will make it right. But we also try and be there for them for the frustrating times with the builders and, some of the subcontractors, so that, I think one of the benefits that comes with experience, I'm sure you feel this way too, is that you've had the thing happen before, right? So, you can talk them through that process of, it's really frustrating to them and they're trying to find the words to communicate with the contractor, but we can say, like, hey, we've seen this before. Here's how they're going to fix it. Here's how we'll communicate the edits that need to be made, or, you know, whatever it is that we can help kind of make them feel like we're part of the collaboration. We try and communicate that up front. Like, we're going to be your, co-partners in this, and we're really going to help you kind of understand that the communication is going to get tricky and there's going to be challenging points.
It's so fun. It's such a complex relationship because when you're doing $5 to $15 million builds, I mean, these are not 6 month relationships, Kylie. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
these are, in some cases 3, 4, 5 years, and so it's a long
Yeah.
time to really keep on the up and up and keep that relationship healthy.
Yeah, it is. And you get to know people really well. I mean, you know their kids and their dogs and their neighbors and,
Right.
and it's fun. I mean, but yeah, that's a great point. When kind of back to that conversation about the red flags, like we're going to be in this relationship for a long time. So, there is a part of it where we'll have between 2 and 6 meetings with someone before they decide we're the right fit and we decide they're the right fit. Like there's,
Hmm.
the initial meeting, and then there's the meeting at our office, and then there's a meeting at the architect's office or maybe on site. And then sometimes there's a meeting where we'll tour them through one of our recently completed homes. Like you're really starting to get to know each other to make sure it's, a good synergy as well.
Yeah, I love that. So speaking of fun, what do you do for fun?
Well, my favorite thing to do is probably travel with my family and go to concerts.
Nice. And what's
Yeah.
your last concert?
We went to Modest Mouse, like now I'm aging
Nice.
myself,
Modest Mouse. That's awesome.
a few weeks ago, and it was at this amazing venue that we have here in St. Petersburg, which is, our next city
That's
over.
awesome.
And they have, if you're ever here and there's a concert, I don't care what it is, you should just go for the energy, because there's this big tree in the middle. It's an outdoor venue and it's
Hmm.
small, and there's just this big tree in the middle, and it just feels like you're in this like surreal outdoor environment listening to a band you love, and the stars are, it's just amazing.
It's incredible. Well, that's a good choice. Modest Mouse. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so fun. Yeah, and travel's fun. I mean, favorite place to travel.
Well, I'm Australian, so I'd probably have to say Australia. I'm very
It's a
biased.
little hike from Florida.
Yeah, yeah, we're going in November. I'm very excited for Thanksgiving. So all
Oh,
my
fun.
Australian friends are expecting my husband to make a turkey, which will be
Oh,
interesting.
wow. Except it's like it's a little bit different. It's summer there, it's like, getting
Yes.
warm. So,
Yeah, so I was trying to get my family to go over our summer, and they all just flat out refused, because where my family live, it gets really cold and there's
oh
not a
yeah,
lot. It's not like you can ski there. Like you're just cold and
just
miserable.
cold. Yeah.
So they were like, no, we're not going in June. So,
Oh,
yeah, but
that's
I'm
fun.
excited.
Go do a turkey in Australia. That's going to be a fun
Yeah,
event.
yeah, it'll be interesting because neither my husband nor I cook. So we'll see what
Might
happens.
have to do some practice, look on Pinterest and stuff, YouTube.
Yes,
Luckily there's a lot of places to find some good resources now. So
true.
yeah. Well, Kylie, you've been amazing. I can't thank you enough for making time and appreciate the friendship. For those listening, where can they find you?
So we are at pontoninteriors.com, and we're on Instagram, of course, at Ponton Interiors. And you can find us mostly in Tampa, Florida, but we travel wherever the projects take us.
Well, thanks, Kylie.
Thank you.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.